For the ones who work hard to ensure their crew can always go the extra mile, and the ones who get in early so everyone can go home on time, there's Grainger, offering professional-grade supplies backed by product experts so you can quickly and easily find what you need. Plus, you can count on access to a committed team ready to go the extra mile for you. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, with the spotlight on section hikers.
And I'll spread the word, and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast. And I'm your host, Julie Jester Gayhart. If you've been listening to the show for any amount of time, you will know that hiker safety, carrying the 10 essentials on all of your hikes, and recreating responsibly is near and dear to my heart. In fact, you can go over to Instagram and follow a new account I've started called Hiker Safety. And thanks to Paul Collins, or you all know him as Skunk Ape, for designing the Hiker Safety logo. We can also thank Skunk Ape for putting me in contact with today's guest on the show, Dani Beau. Dani has spent several years working in, training, and teaching search and rescue, not only here in the United States, but also in Iceland. Her knowledge is vast in the SAR realm, and I am excited to have her on the show to speak about that and her wilderness skills that led her to be very successful on a popular reality television series surrounding survival, not once, but 3 times. And be sure to stick around until the end of the show for a chance to be entered into a drawing to win one of Dani's fire starter necklaces that you can find on her Etsy store. Thanks for tuning in for this week's episode. And now on to Dani Beau and how she went from search and rescue to being very successful on Naked and Afraid. All right, you guys, welcome back to the podcast and welcome with me to the show for a very unique episode. As you all heard in the introduction, Dani Beau, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you on this podcast.
I am excited. Okay, first and foremost, but just go ahead and get it out there. I said it in my intro. You have been on Naked and Afraid, right? 3 times.
Yes. Yep. I've been on Naked and Afraid 3 times now.
And you have been very successful.
I made it through 2 21-day challenges and 1 40-day challenge as a vegan.
In my mind, that is very successful. So bravo on that. And we're going to get back to that. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But surprisingly enough, I am more interested in learning about your background in search and rescue. I know you've done some time in search and rescue here in the United States. You've spent some time learning, teaching, and training in Iceland. And all the listeners know I'm on this, I don't even want to call it a bandwagon. I am a very heavy proponent of hiker safety.
Yes.
And people being safe, whether it's a day hike, a section hike, a through hike, whether they're going out for the afternoon. And I think your background in search and rescue is what led you to be extremely successful on Naked and Afraid. So I guess the best way to start off is, how did you get started in SAR, search and rescue?
Back in, I think it was 2012, almost 10 years ago, I was working as an EMT, and that got me into, when you're whether you're a nurse, a paramedic, an EMT, you have to fulfill this continuing education hours or ConEds or CMEs. And in
Yeah,
order
all
to
those
do
things.
that,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I started attending they're called wilderness medicine conferences. And that was like basically a little weekend getaway where you learn all this stuff and it counts as like 48 hours to your con eds, as opposed to going and sitting in a boring classroom for 3 hours listening to a lecture.
Yeah, that sounds much more interesting to me.
Yeah, so I entered from an EMT to the wilderness medicine world, met a lot of people involved in search and rescue, and I just found how it all intertwines. Also being an avid hiker and backpacker, it just was a great way to connect, and then it made myself improve on my knowledge and my skills for my hobbies and my safety.
And then somehow did you end up with the Greater Philadelphia Search and Rescue? Kind of how did you end up with that?
At that time, I was living in the Philadelphia area, and I basically just Googled search and rescue teams near me, and I found GPSAR, which is Greater Philadelphia Search and Rescue, and I emailed them. They invited me out to practice with them and train with them, and then once you attend, I think it's 80% of the meetings after 3 months, then you become an active member.
So that's interesting. So you said you trained and practiced with them. So from a hiker perspective, I'm always curious. I never want to be in a search and rescue situation. So I always want to learn what I should not be doing. So when you're training and practicing, are you putting yourselves in scenarios that people have got themselves into that could have been avoidable? Like, explain some of the things maybe you're learning out there before they put you on an active team.
Yeah, all of the trainings are so rewarding. Even if you feel like you have so much knowledge as a hiker, there's so much more out there. And sometimes the more important thing is learning about lost person behavior, especially when it's regarding hikers. So if you're in a group with other people, it's just good to know additional skills that you might not think you need. So some of our trainings would be, it's always weather dependent too. And it's divided into different categories. So for example, we might do one Tuesday evening for a couple hours going over helpful search and rescue knots to use, tracking, studying lost person behavior, because it is different if you're looking for a child as compared to a hunter or a hiker. Also going over basic first aid, mountaineering, navigation, using a compass and a map and not relying
That's
on
huge. I've been preaching that for a while. It's one thing for people to have in their to carry one, but it's another thing to use it.
Yeah.
And even to orient yourself, north, based on, the sun rising, the sun setting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I'm sure within search and rescue, you have found people that didn't have any of that stuff.
Yeah. And to be completely honest with you, I was that person that had a compass and a map in my backpack hiking. And I did not really know how to properly use it until I joined the volunteer search and rescue teams. So,
and you also brought up weather too. Like you're
mm-hmm.
talking, I know we're going to talk about your time in Iceland too. And I just imagine freezing to death in Iceland, just based on the name, like, I am not a cold weather hiker because it scares me of all the equipment you have to bring and
mm-hmm.
sweating and being able to layer properly.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that here in the United States more prevalent or as equal to maybe in Iceland as far as like be prepared for weather?
I would say it's very geographical. So you have to remember Iceland is a country. It looks like a fairy tale place, but looking at it, it's just moss and mountains. There's no trees. There's really nowhere to build a shelter. So in Iceland, you really have to be prepared and have all those extra layers in your backpack. And that includes warmth and waterproof layers. Whereas in the Philadelphia area and most of the US, we can find coverage under trees. So that was definitely a big difference for me.
So let me ask you this. So before we get into talking to Iceland, and I might be jumping all over our agenda here because I'm just thinking of things. So, you start off as an EMT and then, you start doing your continuing education credits and kind of realize, hey, I'm kind of interested in this search and rescue, and you go through the training and now you're on an active team. Is it frightening to actually get your first call and have to really go out and look for somebody, or how is it coordinated? I'm curious about that too. So you get a call, you got to go out, you got to look for somebody, how are you feeling, and how is a search coordinated really?
Once you are certified as an active responder in the US, that could mean getting it's called a SARTEC level, SARTEC 1, 2, and 3. In Iceland, it's a little bit different. But once you're on the dispatch list, you would get usually a phone call or a text message, and you would set that alert so oh, it's the emergency alert. And if you're able to respond, you respond to that text and just say yes or no. And then you gather at your base area. And then from there, you would go to the meeting point where the search is started. And it is very structured. There is a chief that's handling all of the operations and the management of the search squads. And then there's usually a lot of dog handlers involved too. So that's why we train a lot together. You get to know a lot of different people and who is good at what terrain. For example, my dog was doing search and rescue in Philly, which we would have a lot of calls in the forest of missing hunters. That was a large statistic.
Oh,
and then when I
wow.
brought her over to Iceland, where there's no trees, she was kind of just not used to it.
What do I do? Yeah.
Yeah. So they wouldn't use her for the open land searches because she's used to sniffing up and looking up in the trees.
Versus like you were saying, it's just no trees, just mossy. I can imagine for a dog, it's like, what in the world is happening here? A whole nother training.
Yeah. Even in Iceland, it was a lot of rocky terrain, which my dog was not used to walking on this, kind of like a debris setting, just a bunch of unstable, wobbly rocks.
And your dog is your world too, right? Your dog is like, your world too.
Mm-hmm.
So all, the training here. So let's talk about Iceland. So how did you get from, being an EMT? I know you have, is it a biology degree, or am I getting that wrong?
My degree is in environmental science.
Environmental science. Okay.
Simple. Yeah.
Okay. So environmental studies, you're EMT, you're doing, search and rescue on a team. How do you end up over in Iceland?
Once I finished my bachelor's in the US, I was just looking into where to get my master's degree. I was living in I was living in Alaska at that time. And
oh, wow. Okay.
The environment I was researching was, Arctic kind of plants and environmental conditions, natural resources. Basically, I went to Iceland to get my master's degree, and in Europe, there's no tuition. So it was like, do I go to the University of Anchorage, Alaska and pay like $100,000, or do I go to Europe and get a free education? But the plant species was very similar, so that's why I chose Iceland. There was a specific plant. I'm not going to bore you about that, but I went there for a 2-year program. I ended up staying another 3 years, just working there at the university. And now I'm back in the US.
All right. So I guess with all of this being said, with all of your experience and getting back to, primarily I have section hikers on the podcast and I talk about carrying these 10 essentials. People want to talk about gear all the time. Help us, with that overall hiker safety. How can we be prepared, whether we're going for a day hike, whether we're going for, 2 or 3 weeks section hike, whether we're going out for 6 months? Is it mental? I'm sure it's a combination of everything. Supplies, know how to use our supplies, and be mentally prepared. So from someone who has probably seen more than what we want to know about people not being prepared, what do you recommend for us?
Those are all really good points. I'm happy you brought that up. I absolutely think preparedness is the most important thing here. And that includes having the right gear with you, knowing the environment that you're entering, and also just telling someone your plans. It happens a lot that you are planning to go on like a 2-hour day hike and you're not bringing most of the essential items with you because it's just a short hike. But that's how accidents happen, and that's how most of the search operations are initiated. So I absolutely think just familiarizing yourself with just kind of have a grab pack. You're going on a quick day hike. know what your 10 essential items are appropriate for the place that you're going, and just send a text to a friend. Like, if you don't hear back from me by this time, my car is parked here and this is where I'm going. These are my plans.
And so I hear people all the time, and you're in the hiking world too, and there's this huge debate out there. Do I take my rain gear? Do I not take my rain gear? Do I take my rain gear? I'm not taking my rain gear. It's supposed to be burning up today.
Mm-hmm.
I always take my rain gear. Raincoat, rain pants. I don't care if it's, 100 degrees. My philosophy is, I know my body, and I know if I sit down for lunch and I've climbed 6,000 feet, the temperature is going to change. Mm-hmm. So how do we change people's minds who don't want to carry, their essential items? How do we change that? Yeah. And I use rain pants and rain gear because I hear that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like people not carrying enough water. Oh, I'm only going to be gone for like an hour. I don't need that much water. How do we begin the process of changing people's minds on that?
I think having a waterproof layer is so essential, even if rain isn't in the forecast. But you just never know. And that's why, like, rain gear, for example, can be a multi-use item. So maybe look at it that way. Even if it's not going to rain, maybe you're stuck in a situation where you have to improvise a shelter. You can use that rain gear to make part of your shelter. Or maybe you come across another hiker and they're lacking gear, or they're hypothermic, or, just think of all of the uses, and it doesn't really weigh that much. It can fold up very, very tiny. And it's just one of those things that it's absolutely better to have it than put yourself in a situation where you need it to survive.
Right. And you're wishing you had it because something happened, or, you never know if you're going to twist it. This is why I always say, you don't know if you're going to twist it. I'm not wishing injury on anybody, but you don't know if you're going to twist an ankle. You might tweak your arm. You might fall, and you're going to get chilly if you have to wait around a while. So, just carry them, people. Just carry it. And then I say, if you can't carry your rain gear, you might need to reevaluate, how you're training or something like that. So,
right.
One of the things that you said to me during our initial conversation, and I forgot to tell everybody this, you guys heard it in the intro, we are actually going to have a giveaway of a couple of Dani's necklaces that we're going to talk about here shortly. So be listening to everything we talked about, because we're going to give you hints and clues. So I failed to mention that at the beginning because I got so excited that I was going to be speaking with you. So everybody be listening for clues as we go along that might be answers to the 2 questions we're going to ask at the end of the show. But going back to what I was just going to ask you, you said something to me that really has resonated with me ever since our initial conversation. You said a proven statistic is most people are found within a half-mile radius of the last point seen.
Mm-hmm.
And part of this problem is that people do not know how to navigate properly. So you recommended a crucial item is not maybe something physical that they have besides the map and paper, but mentally know how to navigate properly. So talk about that statistic with us.
Yeah. So I follow a lot of search and rescue statistics, and just within my own teams, we always have an end of the year meeting and formulate everything. And what have we noticed, and what can we educate the community about to lower the statistic on missing persons? And it has been proven that most lost people from the PLS, the point last seen, they're really only typically a half-mile radius, around from a half-mile to a 2-mile radius from the point where they were last seen by somebody else, or that their location pinged from. And that just shows you how in your mind, that person is literally right next to the trail. But in your mind, you've psyched yourself out into thinking that you're so far away and that you're so lost. So that's why having an item like a compass or a map is very crucial, because you can quickly get yourself back on the track. Or having a Garmin GPS is what I prefer, but there's also even phone apps. Gaia GPS is another free app that I like, but you need phone battery to run that. So
right. And that's carrying an extra external battery, which I've started doing now, because it's like, okay, I don't know how long I'm going to be out here. They don't weigh that much. That I've just added that into my fanny pack on a day hike. Hey, if I need this, This is just how it's going to go down. And you can find all kind of YouTube videos out there of all kinds of hikers and what external batteries they carry and all that stuff. So that is very, it's like, wow, you really think about that. Like you said, a half a mile is not that, it's not that far, but if you don't know how to figure out what direction you're in, it is that far.
Right. Or if you're letting your mind get to you and those little thoughts are making you think that you're totally lost, but you're really just right there. So I would say the second that you think that you're lost, just first of all, calm yourself and just take a moment to analyze the environment, what's going on, what do I need to prioritize right now? And then I would make a little mark in the tree, like just show someone that you were there. Because when we're out searching for people, we're putting ourselves in that position and we're imagining like, okay, this is a hiker. They're probably going to tend to walk downhill, or they're lost at a common trailhead and people tend to go this way, or maybe the trail wasn't recognizable. Maybe there was a storm and the trees hid the trail and it looks like the person would be going this way. So it's helpful to leave some kind of a clue, even if it's just etching in some trees. So that way it helps us. And it's also helping you because then you're able to backtrack if you think that maybe you took the wrong direction.
Now, I do have a question based on what you said, because I've heard, I don't know, over the years I've heard this. So if I truly end up knowing, that I'm lost and I can't find my way, is it better to stay put or is it better to move? Or because I've heard both things, move downhill, follow the flow of water if you can. Eventually water will lead you somewhere. And I've also heard stay put. So is there an overall recommendation or something that's better?
I think it is very situational. So for example, in Iceland, I would not tell you to stay put because the nights get very harsh. The weather changes in an instant. So in most cases, if you are uphill, I would agree to say that you should walk downhill. If you find a river or a stream, that's even better, because no matter what, that civilization is downhill. So I would find a river or a stream and stay a safe distance from it, depending on your environment. It's never a good idea to walk right along the river because a lot of different potential predators could be there. You don't want to make a bad situation even worse. But following a water source downstream will eventually get you back to civilization. But
Perfect.
You also have to look at, can I stay put here? Do I have what I need in my day pack to get me through a few days? Or am I better off using the energy reserves now to make it down to a lower, safer elevation?
A lot to think about too, even if you're not by yourself. Like if somebody else got injured or if you got lost with two people, then you're having to make decisions like, okay, are we making this together? Can both of us handle this? So like you said, I guess it is situational, a lot to think about.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've learned so far is tell somebody where you're going, tell somebody the trailhead, carry your 10 essentials, have your map and compass, but know how to use your map and compass, GPS, your phone, an extra external battery, and, carry your rain gear, people.
Yeah, for sure.
And another thing that concerns me, even when I don't think I'm in a bad situation, is probably my number one fear is hypothermia.
Yes.
And I know you said that's the number one injury in Iceland, is hypothermia. So to me, this comes into, having some type of shelter or small bivy sack or knowing how to build a fire. So talk to us about hypothermia and how do we know if we're getting in that situation?
Yeah. So hypothermia is when heat is escaping your body faster than your body can warm itself. And this is the number one rescue scenario in Iceland. But hypothermia, it doesn't have to happen in icy cold environments. It can happen in the summer. For example, if you get really wet and it's a chilly summer night, you can become hypothermic if you're not prepared with the right gear and nutrition. So it is important to have those extra layers with you, have some extra energy bars with you, and be able to recognize the signs of hypothermia, not just for yourself, but for another person in your group or even someone else that you're crossing on the trail. And some of those signs that you can look for, there are 3 different stages of hypothermia, but a big one is when it is pretty chilly out and someone is insisting that they're stripping their layers. And that's showing that their mindset isn't right. Yeah, a hypothermic person in a later stage is their mind is just tricked into thinking that they're hot, but in reality, their core body temperature is extremely low, and that's when it gets dangerous.
So that's why I've heard situations or read about situations where they have found hikers pretty much naked and their clothes it's like the clothes lead you to where they are because they start taking their clothes off.
And that's like the severe stage of hypothermia. But in the beginning, there will be that shivering and just kind of altered state of consciousness. And then when it gets beyond that point, that's when the shivering stops. And that's when you are inclined to remove your clothing. It's just a trick of the mind.
Can you get yourself out of it at that point? Like mentally, can you? Okay.
For yourself, it's very hard. So the best thing for hypothermia is prevention. That's the best defense, is to prevent that from happening, but be familiar with the signs. Because if you're alone and you're experiencing it, it's very difficult to manage if you get into that going from mild to moderate to severe stage. So just being self-aware and having, just doing a little bit reading up on it will go a long way. But when you get to that final stage, the only thing that can really help you or the other person is rewarming them, giving them warm, like hot water or tea, very slow, easy sips, and then handling them very carefully, just because at that point, your whole body system is very vulnerable.
So what about if you do carry, I carry just like a very, very light bivy sack. Now, I've heard a couple different things on this. I'll be interested to hear what we should actually be doing. And some people have said, strip the person, put them in the bivy sack, get them warm. Or I've heard put all the clothes on, get them in their bivy sack and get them warm. So what should we do?
Really good question.
And she's smiling here, so it's like I don't know what's gonna happen.
There is a lot of different takes on this, and that's because there's a lot of different situations again. And I guess treating a hypothermic person, what you brought up about putting them in a sleeping bag with or without clothes, if the clothes are wet or just like hardened, then you want to remove the clothing. Put them in the sleeping bag, give them an appropriate shelter, protect them from any weather disturbances, make a little fire. But what we do is we would get into the sleeping bag with the person to share our body heat.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And I'm saying that's what we would do in Iceland because we don't have the ability to make fire.
Well, listen, if I ever get hypothermic and anybody's hiking with me, I welcome you in to warm me up. Okay.
Yeah.
Just get in. Okay.
Yeah. So you would make a little shelter, prepare for rewarming. And that's why I don't like if this happens, but if you're in a group of people, when someone is seriously injured or hypothermic, it can affect the whole group dynamic. It can make everyone else a little bit psyched out. So when that happens, I would start assigning roles to people. All right, I need you to go and gather firewood that's about this size, and then tell the other person, I need you to get these really big pieces, and assign everyone a task. So that way they have this responsibility and it's distracting them from the actual dangerous situation, the life-threatening situation that is taking place.
Gotcha.
And so building a fire is probably the best thing,
And I was going to say, leading into that. Yeah. So, you're helping someone get warm. So, building a fire is probably, so you recommended that right away. So if you're by yourself, I don't know if that's a feasible thing. Should I be thinking about that if I'm by myself and I feel like I'm getting warmer and I'm cognizant enough, to kind of make those decisions? Is fire the first thing I want to try to do? And if I'm carrying my 10 essentials, I should have stuff to make fire.
Absolutely. I would say before a fire, I would always put shelter, because say you make a fire and then it starts raining out of nowhere, you're not going to sustain a fire if everything turns wet. So
That
having
makes
some
sense.
kind
Yeah.
of shelter, removing the person from that cold, rainy, if it's raining environment, and then building the fire.
And that's a lot to think about, because I'm sitting here right now thinking, could I actually build my own shelter with what I might carry? And I mean, we try not to think about these things, but people go missing on trails every year. People get lost all the time. And it's like, maybe we should spend training for hiking is one thing, but maybe we should spend more time training for, to be safe, and prevention, as you say, and carrying what we should, but also knowing how to use what we're carrying.
Right, exactly.
So,
And then that supports the idea of bring that rain gear, because you really don't know if rain's not in the forecast, you could still utilize that for hypothermia wraps, or even as a signal if it's a bright color. That's extremely helpful for helicopter rescues, is having some kind of a flag, so to say.
wow. Well, I got to tell you, I mean, you've definitely given us a lot of food for thought. And before we talk about your Naked and Afraid adventure, I do want to tell people, because I am looking at this, what we are giving away today. We're giving away 2 fire necklaces. I was going to hold it up and show Dani, but this is actually your necklace, Dani. So I don't have to hold it up and show you, but it is this awesome, it's more than a necklace, it's a tool. And it's, it's a way to make fire. And we're giving away 2 of these today. So Dani is donating 1 for our listeners, and Paul Collins, or you guys know him as Skunk Ape, is donating 1. So let's talk about your Etsy store real quick, because you have a store with some really cool items for those that are out in the wilderness, whether hunting, hiking, what have you. But let's talk about this fire starter deck. How did this concept get started? Why did you decide to start doing this?
Well, throughout all of the different environments I've placed myself in, including the challenges from Naked and Afraid, I was in South America around places that were extremely foreign to me as far as fauna and flora. And we're only allowed to bring 1 item. So,
oh wow,
this
I didn't know you could bring any items. That's interesting.
Yeah, the
Okay.
concept is 1 man, 1 woman. Each person brings 1 item, and then everything else you have to improvise and make from scratch, which is a really fun challenge. But then, of course, when you do something, when you go through that, like not having clothes was one thing, not having shoes, but not having the items that you're used to having in your backpack, you really grow to appreciate what you truly need compared to like what you can improvise in the wild. So my Etsy store is kind of the brainchild of all of my thoughts over the last 10 years, doing
awesome.
search and rescue and putting myself through these challenges and
it's
everything.
called Arctic Pines, right? Yeah,
Arctic Pines on Etsy. But the fire starter necklace in particular, I make it's a leather cord or a paracord, which makes up for the cordage that might come in handy. There's a small ferro rod, ferrocium rod, and then there's a striker that's made out of ceramic. And I'm using ceramic so that way it won't rust, so it can be used in any environment. And
it'll go through TSA, right? That is, yes.
That's why I didn't want to use like a stainless steel or a high carbon steel striker, because they would take it at the airport. But even just sitting on the plane, knowing that I have this ability to make fire if some weird situation happens, which I think about all the time. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but I'm always just like, oh, what if this happened? Okay, I have fire. What do I have for shelter? So it's just kind of, all of these things that I have there are wearable survival gear.
And the tinder that comes with these things, I'm telling you, I was more impressed with the tinder. Well, when you first opened, I was like, wow, this is awesome. I mean, I just immediately started thinking how much I need to put in my day pack, where I could put this. And then you asked me if I used it yet. And I was like, okay, somebody's going to have to show me how to.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, that you brought up Tinder, because you can have all of, the fire making skills in the wild that you want. But I learned this recently in the Amazon rainforest, where it's just 24/7 rain. Having that little tiny Tinder bundle makes all of the difference. You can't start a fire unless you have those smaller, precious little pieces. And you treat it like a baby, like a newborn baby. You just have to feed it, and that way it can grow big enough to sustain a little bonfire, so to say.
Awesome. Well, you guys go to the Etsy store. There's, I don't know, you probably have 20 items on there, 15, 20 items, various things. And now we know how they were all created based on the last 10 years of search and rescue. Most definitely probably being on Naked and Afraid and only be able to take one item. So before we close out, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for talking to us about this. My listeners know that I'm very adamant about hiker safety. One of the main reasons is I do have a very close family friend that is still missing on the Pacific Crest Trail. His name is Chris Sherpa Fowler. He went missing in October of 2016. And it was one of those situations where it was the end of the season. It was getting cold, weather was coming in. And he's still lost. And I think about him every day. And I think about the search and rescue teams that still go out and look for him. And I've learned the process of what works out there, what people are looking for. So I'm just very appreciative of people like you that learn your craft and go out and look for people who may not be smart in situations, or maybe they are and they just can't get out of the situation that they're in. So thank you for that. I'm very much appreciative.
Well, it's very nice to hear. Thanks.
And Paul knows that, and he's like, "Oh my God, you got to talk to her." But she's been on Naked and Afraid, so now we have to talk about Naked and Afraid.
Of course.
Okay, so how the heck did you end up on Naked and Afraid? I mean, did all this? You think your background with search and rescue, EMT? Did that do it, or did somebody just call you and say, "Hey, are you interested in this?" Okay, so walk us through how'd this happen.
Back in 2013, it was a brand new show at the time, and the casting agency was scouting people that attended the wilderness medicine school that I went to get my WEMT, which is like a wilderness EMT upgrade. And then they sent out the alert, and then I submitted that I'm interested. And then they flew me to LA to do like an on-camera test. And I was there for 2 days, and it was really vague. They were just like, "Okay, thanks for coming. If we pick you, we'll call you." And then they gave me like a very open, like within the next 6 months, we'll contact you.
Wow.
And I just left there thinking like, I'm 24 years old. I don't have this cool world travel experience like a lot of these military participants have, like doing their hardcore training in Panama and all this jungle knowledge. So they ended up calling me and completed the first one, said I'm never doing this again. And then shortly after that, they called me for the first 40-day challenge.
Wow.
Same reaction after that. I was like, I'm never going through this again. But it's hard when you get that call. Like for me, it's just really testing all of the knowledge and the skills that you've acquired over the years. And I love improvising. And that's why I think I was drawn to this in the first, like survival and bushcraft and even rescue, because you have your backpack, but you're learning about your environment and finding multi-uses for something that someone would consider just a single-use item.
And I love that you are explaining it that way, because I think sometimes with reality television shows, it's like, oh, they just throw people out there and there's camera people out there and, they might be naked, but they're not really, fending for themselves in the elements and all. That's not the case, right? Like,
no. And you can see it. My favorite part is probably at the very end of the last episode is they take a photo of you every single day. And at the end of the episode, they do a little time lapse. So it's really cool to see the transformation and the weight loss, because you are eating a lot smaller than you would at home and just food from the earth,
So
there's no help or anything like that.
There's no, I mean, you do have camera people there, right? Like there's somebody like with you. Do you have one person? And are they allowed to even say anything to you?
Funny story about that. There's a small camera crew. There's a producer, a camera guy, and a sound guy. And that's it. And they are only there from like 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So basically sunrise to sunset. And then they have usually a 2-hour commute, either by boat or hiking to a vehicle. And they do go back and stay at their hotels. And we are left alone at night, and they have these cameras set up that are running off of generators. And there is a medic tent with someone is always manning it. Usually between a half mile to a mile away from us. And we have a radio and emergency beacon. So you can press that button anytime if you want to go home or if there's an emergency.
So at any time, did you say, I'm out of here? Like, I don't know. I've watched a few episodes. There's so many bugs. There's so many, I mean, just it's where they have you guys go. It's like, what the heck? How are they supposed to survive in a tropical rainforest? Where it's raining all the time and it's 50 degrees and I just cannot imagine. And you can't have a fire.
It's very difficult.
You told me in our initial conversation, which I thought was it's the mentality aspect of it. You spoke about it earlier, having that, mentality of, getting yourself situated. If you're lost, get your bearings about you and, and I like how you went into, if you're with somebody and you're in a survival situation, give people jobs, distract them from, maybe what they're doing, give them something, to focus on. Was that your strategy? Are we going to unveil your strategy right here?
Oh, no. And this is like, I feel like search and rescue has very much prepared me for just training my mindset and how to handle these emergency unexpected situations. Getting lost is never a planned thing. So, or me getting dropped into the Colombian jungle or the Amazon rainforest, like you don't really have the time to prepare for that. So then you're relying on your, what you've been practicing over the years. So, it's really interesting. I don't know.
I know she's smiling as I can tell you're going back, like just trying to think, because when you're in it, you sometimes just focus on how you're going to get out of it. Was that the case with you? Like, I could see you going back in your mind, like thinking about it, so when you were there, were you just trying to figure out, how am I going to endure this and get out of here? Or did you really put yourself in the moment?
I guess my real strategy was I felt like I was a character in a video game and the outside world didn't matter because your mindset really is everything, your attitude and how you perceive the situation. So I would say that challenge is 90% mental and 10% skill. So for example, maybe you tried to go hunting one day or fishing, you didn't catch anything, but you gathered some firewood and added it to your stockpile. It's so easy for your mind to dwell on the failures that you had from getting food that you're not appreciating this little success that you had. So that was my mental strategy, is every day make some kind of little accomplishment and just accept that, this is a challenge. So it's not going to go exactly how I want it to go. It's going to be hard. We are battling the weather. We don't have any of the items that we're used to having back at home. And yeah, that's where my SAR training came in handy, is just being prepared for the unexpected. That's the best way to put it.
Were you prepared for who you were going to be paired with?
I kind of had a feeling, because when they interview you, they of course like categorize your personality type, and I knew like I was the vegan girl. And I knew that they were going to put me with like some macho.
The meat and potato guy.
Yeah. So I was like expecting that. And all of the challenges, they did put me with like someone that fits that. And I understand like it is like, yes, it's a challenge, but it is a TV show. So of course they want to pair people that are very opposite. So that way it makes a more interesting concept, and also more drama, of course, to get ratings. And it was really, really interesting for me because I was partnered with people I have nothing in common with them other than we're both walking up to each other completely naked in the middle of a jungle or a desert.
Okay, so the naked part, is that really a big, I mean, I wouldn't want to do it, but is it that big of a deal? Or do you just, I don't know. That seems to be, the catchphrase of it all, that's all people want to know. So I got to ask you, what's the big deal about being naked, or is it a big deal?
Yeah,
obviously it wasn't a big deal to you, right? Like
it wasn't. But first of all, the marketing of that show is amazing. It's now the #1 series. They use the word naked, so everyone's going to be like, what is this?
What?
But I think that the most awkward thing for me was like when you fly there, you're usually at your hotel for a couple of days. Your producer comes to your hotel room and just gives you like, okay, this is how it's going to work. We have a safety debriefing and we like sign some papers and then we're there. And the awkward part was the morning of like my insertion day on day 1, the production crew picked me up and they're just covered in mosquito bites and mud, and they're wearing full clothing, hats, mosquito nets, snake boots. And I'm just
wow.
Like, I'm already analyzing their appearance of where they just came from, because they go and scout, of course, where they're gonna like insert people. And that at that moment, I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, I'm putting myself into an environment where I know nothing about. I've never left the country at that time. Wow. So that was nerve-wracking, is like taking off your clothes in front of all of these, the crew. That was weird. Yeah. But all of that left, knowing, as soon as you see your partner, they always make it a really long, awkward thing where you can like see them from far away, and then time kind of freezes and you're just like, oh my God, don't look. No, it's just this really long, like couple-minute walk that you're seeing another naked person from a distance. But for me, I saw it as like, I'm not doing this alone. I cannot wait to have someone to experience this with me. No matter how difficult of a personality they may be or their background, we're doing this together, and we're gonna find a way to make this a positive experience and succeed.
Well, I think it's awesome. So I got to ask you, if they call you again, are you going for #4?
I mean, after the third one, that they put me in the most difficult location. It was the Amazon rainforest in peak monsoon season. Ooh. So I made it. It was really, really hard. And honestly, I don't know. I think I would reconsider doing a 4th one, just because I have moved on to other things since then. And it's a great challenge, but it's been almost 8 years since I filmed the very first one. Wow. And, things change, and I don't want to be stuck as a naked and afraid.
No, you don't. That's forever, why I didn't want to I didn't want to focus on, I'm going to have Dani on. She's from Naked and Afraid. It's really about, that's just it allows me to have a fun conversation with you. So I could see that. I could definitely see that.
But I'll always be extremely proud of myself for making it through. And for me, being a vegetarian my entire life, it meant a lot for me to be able to not only complete the challenge, but make it to the finish line without consuming or having to kill an animal. So for me personally, that was my great accomplishment, is testing myself and sticking with my beliefs.
And that I can't even imagine. It just seems like it would be easier. I mean, I guess you'd have to know all your plants, and we could probably get into that, surviving off of particular plant. I don't know plants. I don't know flowers. I am horrible when it comes to that stuff. And I'm sure people ask you all the time, what did you eat? So I guess I'll have to ask you, what did you survive on out there?
Luckily, I was in South America, which of course they naturally have a lot more vegetarian-friendly vegetation. So for me, I just looked at it as like, all right, I'm placed in this grocery store, but now I have to find all the food items. And I'm not familiar with South American plants, but my knowledge in the US and my school studies have taught me what to look for. And I think anyone can find this useful. And this is another good point. If you are planning a hike, it's good to just, do a little search. What are the wild edibles in this area that I'm going to, just in case, whether it be a mushroom, which can be kind of iffy, but also just edible leaves and flowers and roots. Roots were a really great food source for me, like the yucca root. I was digging them up, like almost a foot long. And
wow,
that I was, able to make like mashed potatoes out of it, potato chips. I made little French fries. I was pretending a lot. And I also, I found a lot of like nut protein. So almonds, cashews blew my mind, by the way. I had no idea that cashews are poisonous. So you have to know that you have to roast them in order to make them edible and safe to consume. And then when I got out, one of the first things I did was like Google, how do I make a cashew edible? And then I found this crazy process. I give people all the credit that are processing and producing these. And it just made me think like how hard I had to work to make 5 cashews edible. And just being able to go to the grocery store now and purchase a bag.
And just get cashews, like no problem.
Yeah.
Wow.
So other than that, I did find a lot of fruits as well, edible flowers, edible leaves.
And I know you said the process is, they do like a before and after and this like progression of over the 21 days or the 40 days that you were out there. And obviously, I mean, you lose a lot of weight. But I thought I was done asking you questions, but I'm not. I've got one more.
Okay.
So like your recovery process after you put your body through that, what's that like? I mean, it has to be, you probably just can't gorge on a lot of food right away because your body is not used to that now, even though you're probably starving. So how was your recovery afterwards?
For me personally, health-wise, I was fine after all 3 challenges. Some of my partners, they were all eating fish and meat. Some of my partners did contract MRSA, which I always thought you could only get that from a hospital, but it is found on reptiles. So,
oh wow,
one girl had an actual hole in her cheek, like it's a flesh-eating disease. So a lot of people came back with really serious injuries or had to tap out medically, or they got removed from the challenge. One of the executive producer at the time, his name's Steve Rankin, he was scouting one of the locations and he was 3rd in line stepping over a log on a trail. And he was bit by a fer-de-lance snake, which is a very dangerous pit viper. It's deadly if you get bit, and he had to get immediately evacuated for emergency surgery. And if you look up his name, there's some nasty pictures, but thinking about, there's a lot of things that can happen, but I came out unscathed. And the weirdest part for me, I guess, was after the 40-day challenge, especially, it was very strange to be around crowds of people. There was someone, and going back on one of your other questions, the producers aren't allowed to talk to us about what's happening in the world. They'll just talk to us, just small chit chat and, anything safety or planning kind of thing. But if you're like someone was filming over the presidential election and they weren't allowed to tell them who was elected president. So that caused a lot of, the cast was like, I'm an American citizen. I deserve to know who my president is. They're like, no, we can't tell you anything.
Nope, this is not what you signed up for. That's interesting. And it's interesting correlation that, you had a hard time being around people, because even if I go out for a section hike, it could be 2-3 weeks, a month. And even though you see people on the trail, I have a hard time being around people, even just that, short amount of time, not 20 days or, even 40 days. It's like, you saying that is taking me back to, wow, it's like a reentry.
Exactly. Yeah. Or even just hearing music for the first time was strange. I also forgot all of my passwords to my phone and my email. It took me a while to readjust to society because I was just so reliant on living in this natural world. And another thing I noticed was our senses just got so in tune to our environment that when the crew would come the next morning, we could smell like what kind of shampoo they had, or if they drank a soda, we could smell like exactly what kind of soda that they drank. So I did notice that my senses that we're not used to using all the time in everyday life, they became very magnified to everything and very sensitive.
That is crazy. So when you said you could smell their deodorant, like when you're out on the trail, it's like, oh, they're a day hiker, because you could smell shampoos
right.
and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, very cool. I got to tell you, from what we started off with talking about search and rescue, you given us a ton of information. I want everybody to go to your Etsy store. I'm going to put it in the show notes. It's Arctic Pines. And we have this giveaway. So I've got 2 necklaces that 2 listeners are going to win. And we are going to, I guess I'm a school teacher, so you're going to have a quiz. So, so we're going to end the episode with 2 questions. And you guys are going to answer these 2 questions. You're going to email me your answers to jester@jestersectionhiker.com. And we're going to give it a couple weeks for people to listen to the episode. And then on Saturday, October the 16th, I'm going to announce the winners. I'm going to mail you your awesome fire starter necklaces. So I'm going to read the first question because one of the necklaces was donated by Paul Collins or Skunk Ape. And this is actually his question. So question number 1, we want to know 2 benefits of having a fire in a survival situation. So question number 1 is, what are 2 benefits to having a fire in a survival situation? And Dani is going to give us question number 2.
Question 2, we talked about hypothermia in this podcast. So my question is, what is the best defense for hypothermia?
All right, you guys. Email me your answers. Question number 1, 2 benefits of having a fire. Question number 2, the best defense against hypothermia. You're going to get one of these awesome fire starter necklaces. I'm going to jumble them all up. It'll be random. We'll pull 2 names. I'll let you guys know. And Dani, thank you. I cannot thank you enough. Seriously. I mean, this has been awesome. Is there anything else you want to leave the listeners with to kind of sign us off?
I guess just the most important takeaway for me talking to you guys is just being prepared for the unexpected. Take a look at your day pack, look at what you can improve, and read about different search and rescue scenarios in your area. And even if it's a new area, be on the lookout for what could potentially be a hazard to you and just be ready for it.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Dani. You are welcome on anytime, and we'll chat soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Jester.
Thank you so much, Dani, for joining me on the podcast and sharing your vast knowledge of search and rescue and donating one of your awesome fire starter necklaces for one of our listeners. And also, another thanks goes out to Paul Collins or Skunk Ape for donating another fire starter necklace for the drawing. Please email me your answers to the questions that we talked about earlier to jester@jestersectionhiker.com. And the 2 winners will be announced on the podcast episode that will come out on Saturday, October the 16th. As always, you could go to the hikingradionetwork.com and click on the Jester Section Hiker Show to find all of today's show notes, pictures, and links mentioned in this episode. And while you're out browsing the show notes and pictures, you could also sign up to receive emails from me. I try to send out an email once a week with updates and some behind-the-scenes happenings. If you find value in what we do here at the network, please consider leaving us a donation or writing us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. Be safe out there, and happy section hiking.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning light. I wonder if you'd wander with me, and I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. You're wondering if I go wandering with you, what kind of trouble we'll get ourselves into. Would it be wrong to tag along with a band of vagabonds? You wonder if I'd wander with you. So I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. I'm wondering if you'd come wandering my way, if you ever get lost or if the trail leads you astray. The music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang